I'm John Capuya, and I'm an associate professor of journalism and nonfiction writing at the University of Tampa. And I'm a former journalist in New York at different magazines and newspapers, and I'm the author of 3 nonfiction books, the most recent of which is Florida Soul. It's a history of soul music in the state of Florida. This was a particularly encyclopedic and far-flung project in that I set out to perhaps over-ambitiously document the music that had been made in a very big state over a very big time frame from 1945 to 1980, basically. So in a state like Florida, which is, 800 miles long, it's by the very nature of it kind of a far-flung enterprise. So, but like as in everything else, you just put one foot in front of the other and keep going. And in order to get the book commissioned by the University Press of Florida, I had to submit a detailed proposal. So there was a lot of research that went into it on the front end, so to convince them to publish the book. So I had to submit a detailed outline of what each chapter would contain, which after I got the contract, immediately went by the wayside because it turned out, there was much better stories to be told, or I couldn't get a hold of this person, so plans always fall apart, but you have to have one, or otherwise you don't know what to do. The difficulty here also was, unlike my previous book was a biography, and that is the story of one human life, and so everyone I spoke to about this man, and everything I read was about this man. So it was essentially one, not easy, but one very narrowly focused research project. But in this case, for example, what happened in rhythm and blues music in Pensacola in the panhandle of Florida in the 1950s has nothing to do with what happened in Miami in the south of Florida in the 70s. So every one of these things became its own research project. So that's one reason maybe why it took me 6-7 years to do this book. But I just did it the way journalists always do it. Look for published articles, start making calls, and one thing and one person leads you to the next. Well, the one thing that really worked for me that often works and that people maybe could be aware of going in is one interview leads to the other. And what would often happen is I would be sitting down with one of my musicians or singers in their living room and having a great interview, and I would tell them that I really want to speak to another person who I think they know, and could they vouch for me? Would they call them and tell them that they spoke to me and that I seem like I'm sincere and that I know what I'm doing, and would they recommend me essentially to them, or recommend that they cooperate? So that really helped. That happened in many instances, including at times where I couldn't find this other person, but it turns out that one of their friends or one of their peers had their contact information, because people had stage names, they moved a million times, they got divorced. I mean, it was hard to track some of these people down. So getting people to vouch for you was an important technique. And in terms of dealing with people with sensitivity, I just think all you can do is just be sincere and ask them what you want to know, and they can always say no. If they're too sensitive or they really don't want to discuss something, they'll tell you. But I feel like I have the right to ask, what I want to know and what I think my readers want to know. And people will only let you go as far as they want. For example, in the woman Linda Lindell, I had to get one of her very good friends, who was a former musical colleague of hers, to vouch for me. He recommended to her that she cooperate and be a chapter in my book, and that her career would be acknowledged and her work, affirmed. But she would not let me come and interview her in person, and so we had to speak over the phone, and she wouldn't be photographed. So she laid down the ground rules, and so I agreed, So I didn't really have to show any sensitivity in that, she drew the line. I think it's just something that comes with experience, I knew basically what I set out to do was, roughly speaking, 20 chapters of 20 pages each. So they ended up writing a 400-page book. And luckily, they published it. They published the whole thing, which I was kind of surprised. But I think, having done this for some time, I basically know when I have enough. And what I'm really looking for is not so much the enoughness, but the angle, the approach, the essence of the story that I could tell about them that would be different from the other 19 stories that I'm telling. And so I think it's just something that you get to know through experience and doing a lot of this kind of work, when you have enough material. Now, that being said, often when I sat down to write the actual chapter, I realized I didn't know important things and I would call those people back, or I would realize I had to do some additional interviewing and call a couple of people who worked with them in the 1960s, So knowing that you have enough doesn't mean that you're done, but I would just have the general sense that I understand the parameters of the story, I understand what's going to make it stand out, and I can sit down and start typing and discover what I still need. I tend to write long and then cut back. But one of the things that actually was most helpful in terms of darlings was I have a small group of people who are authors, good friends of mine, and we send each other our manuscripts. And then when they say, you don't need this, this is too much, and you go, no, but that's my favorite thing, then you understand that that's one of your darlings that maybe needs to be killed. So I rely on them, I have about 3 of them, maybe 4. I rely on them to tell me where maybe I've gone too far or where something doesn't need to be in there. I don't know if I was surprised, but one of the things that I think happened was I really came to understand and to appreciate the craft that goes into this music. I mean, I think sometimes there's a stereotype that people can just open their mouths and soulful sounds come out because it's innate and they have it in them and it's just part of being soulful or what have you. But so sitting down with these people and understanding the rehearsals, the practice, the theory, sitting down with people that they would be at the piano or at the keyboard and explain to me like, so then I went to A minor 7th for this reason, and then I had this bass line, but then I thought, well, maybe I should change it, So, when you hear it, it just sounds natural, and though of course it should be that way, it works. But to get to there, as I guess almost every other endeavor, there is a great deal of thought and intelligence and purposefulness that I don't think people, and maybe even myself, didn't fully appreciate. I think the only thing you could do is be yourself. I mean, I'm not black, obviously, but I'm not French either, and I speak French. So when I go to that country, I just speak French as well as I can, and I'm not pretending to anybody that I'm French, and they could probably tell. I'm pretty fluent in the language of soul. I'm a big fan. I really want to find out about it. I happen to be white. Maybe I should have, but I didn't feel too inhibited by that. A lot of writing, a lot of what I've done also is that you, maybe infiltrate isn't the right word, but that you approach and you immerse yourself in a subculture that is not your own. And that's what I find very interesting, including the world of professional wrestling. I'm not one of those people and I knew nothing about it, but I approached them and I told them exactly what I was doing and why. They agreed with the purpose and they cooperated. So the same thing happened. And I think in a lot of cases, these African-American artists either had never gotten a tremendous amount of recognition, or if they had not gotten a lot of recognition in 40 years. And they were happy to see their stories told and their work affirmed, and the value of what they did and their accomplishments acknowledged. So I think that's all you can do. I mean, you could just be sincere and say, hey, this is who I am, this is what I'm trying to do. Will you cooperate? And I didn't feel a lot of pushback, but I also didn't feel any hesitation about trying to go into this world that is not entirely, my own.